Hi guys, today I want to introduce you to somebody very special and very exciting. This is Nancy Tucker. You won't have heard of her at the moment, but you will do in a few months when her book is published, The Time in Between. So Nancy's book is a beautiful literary memoir about her time in between. When she was 9, she was asked to write down at school what she wanted to be when she was older, and she wrote down, without even knowing why, I want to be thin. Ever since then, she suffered through an eating disorder from the ages of like 9. Going onwards, and it's been a bit shit, but also interesting in some ways.
And transformative. And yeah.
So you started kind of not eating and stuff when you were like 9, 10-ish.
Yeah, I think it was probably the thoughts. I think it was a bit later than that. I think the thoughts, certainly the thoughts of kind of body insecurity were end of primary school.
Yeah.
Then the eating stuff was the beginning of secondary school. So kind of like prepubescent, 11.
Yeah, but what's interesting is that you say you weren't really exposed to that much media. You didn't read newspapers, and you're kind of like, I think that's something with like a lot of inverted commas adults now, kind of like, oh, it's the media. They tell you have to be thin, and you're like, I didn't absorb that kind of media.
Well, I think it is really interesting because certainly I was younger probably than the average eating disorder sufferer. It pokes a hole in that whole kind of neat media argument. I mean, like, personally for me, the kind of media causes eating disorders argument is not true at all, and has always felt like mildly insulting. I think because it's kind of, it's very simplistic, and also it implies a kind of baseline level of superficiality.
Yeah, it's kind of like monkey see, monkey do. Like, I saw this really thin girl and now I want to be thin. It's like, it's a little bit more complicated than that.
And certainly for me, no, I didn't, I never read a glossy magazine, because I was like 11. You wouldn't. I do think that the media probably played a part insofar as it's a kind of assimilation thing. So, you are constantly exposed to it, and it almost like gets into your blood. But, for me, it never even was really about wanting to be attractive. It just wasn't a thing. And it was certainly never about wanting to look like anybody else. Things which don't really fit into boxes, like really difficult things.
It's hard to like externalise.
Wanting to disappear, wanting to feel safe, and this kind of constant feeling of being too small and being too big. And you would think kind of it's like anorexia over here and bulimia or binge eating over here, but it's it's not like that. It's like anorexia and bulimia or binge eating. For me, anorexia was never really about like, oh, I'm not hungry, I don't want to eat. Like, you're starving, of course you're hungry. You're you're anorexic, you're not superhuman, like you're still human. And the thing was that I was thinking, I have so little control that I'm not going to eat at all because that is safer. Because if I start to eat, then I would eat the world. Like, it's that kind of feeling. And then to go from that to, I feel like I have no control, and so I'm not going to control, and I'm going to eat too much. It's actually like just it's
that struggle with the gradient. It's the time in between, almost, as some would say. So also in the book you choose to write in loads of different forms, which I thought was really clever. Some of it is in a kind of play form, so it's kind of in a script. And then some of it is in a very very dark humour, like, oh, a guide to helping somebody with anorexia, and like the most sarcastic way ever, which I love. Like, what made you kind of use all these different forms?
Well, the play form is actually quite, I think it's quite interesting.
I think it was quite clever.
Because the thing about, one of the things which I remember very clearly from growing up was that my dad is a television director, and so we would always have kind of stacks and stacks of like scrapbook, so like the paper that I would do my little shitty drawings on when I was little was always play script. So that is a kind of, and that kind of format of the kind of stage direction, like wide shot camera angle, is something which sticks really clearly in my mind from my childhood. So I think that felt really truthful from kind of growing up. That was kind of the way I viewed the way I viewed interaction. And also then I found some really interesting research about how as families we tend to fall into these patterns of interaction which are like we're all following our script and we don't kind of veer outside of the boundaries. And it's all really like, and there is a bit in the book about how my family kind of sitting around a dinner table, and you can tell that it's kind of a repeated pattern of like, I try to say something and my mum is kind of seeing to my sister and my dad's like, don't talk with your mouth full, don't do this, don't do that. So that was something which just I don't know, it just felt really truthful.
And then the other form that you use is kind of a very sarcastic handbook.
Yeah.
And I think that's really interesting because I think a lot of our, like, while eating disorders have come more to the forefront of people's minds nowadays, like, especially in the past nowadays, like probably in the past like 5 years, I think people are a lot more aware of them, but we're still at a very basic level of how we treat them. It's kind of like, Nancy, did you know you're beautiful just the way you are? You should probably eat.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of talking to that audience as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think that also came very much from the fact that I was amongst all the many books about eating disorders I read when I was, which I've read over the years. I did read a lot of like pet instructions for parents.
Yeah.
Partly to kind of suss out what they might be trying. I do remember even then being struck by how like varied the advice was and how there was kind of no real consensus, and a lot of it was really really pretty stupid. I suppose because I wrote it when I think I just turned 19. I was kind of externally, for all intents and purposes, I was kind of recovered. I was kind of leading this sort of normal life, I was kind of getting through, and it seemed to the outside world like I was coping, but of course I really wasn't, because it was all internalised and it was all kind of there and eating away at me. And I always use this really like grim analogy, which is it's like purging, it was kind of like throwing up. It was like I wanted it to come out.